Good evening, class. My name is Patrick Moran. This is the discussion question for week 2 for Dr. Meredith's class. The reason that the U.S. maintains the status quo of bad policy since the 1950s towards the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East in general, um, is kind of two-part. From the beginning of the Cold War, the end of World War II, to the late 1980s, early 1990s, it was it was a very realist point of view. The Middle East had oil, the West needed oil. If the West didn't prop up regimes and sort of try to create some sort of functional foreign policy, I mean, as we went through the readings, all the different, ways they viewed Islam and the ways they viewed nationalism, the U.S. had to try to come up with something cohesive towards the Middle East, because if they didn't, then the Russians would get the oil. I mean, it's plain and simple. Egypt was a little bit different issue. They turned towards Russia, and they had the Suez Canal, which was important, and everybody kind of freaked out about the Suez Canal, the crisis in 1961 or 57 that the book explains. Uh, I can't remember the exact date. I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. But the Egypt was kind of less important in regards to oil. Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsular states were all oil nations, and if the U.S. messed up relations there, or those countries became unstable or turned towards the Middle East, then the U.S. loses the oil, and the oil's got to go somewhere in that bipolar world. It's either going to go to the U.S. or it's going to go to the Soviet Union. So now that explains all for those 40 or so years, but we've got 20 or so years afterwards where it's not such a bipolar world, to try to explain why we still continue it to today, and why we have messes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think that what is probably the case is that over those 40 years, things became so established that, and the the world has shrunk, for lack of a better term. I think you guys know what I mean. In other words, everybody's become so dependent on everybody else. Maybe back in the 50s, the U.S. was kind of more standalone, but with economies being so integrated now, to allow destabilization, maybe not propping up the Saudi regime because they're not nice guys, um, or not, you know, putting a base in Qatar, or not putting a base in Bahrain, and all the economic benefits that the U.S. ends up giving to those nations based on that base. By stopping that, you risk destabilizing the region, which risks destabilizing not just the United States, but the entire world, because it's not just us that depends on Middle East oil. I mean, as you know, as American citizens, we like to sit here and talk and go, well, yeah, we need oil, we import so much oil, but it's not just us. I mean, the French, sure, they use a lot of nuclear power, but they also import oil. The British import oil. The Germans import oil. Everybody imports oil, and where do they get it from? The Middle East. They get it from, it comes out of the Persian Gulf. It goes through the Straits of Hormuz. It goes up through the Suez Canal, and it comes to Europe and the United States. So the United States policy now is sort of stuck in that it continues to prop up these states because it really has no choice. And also, we fail to understand that as we try to support nationalistic movements and we try to support this and that in the Middle East, we fail to understand that they don't, them in the Middle East, they don't see things the way we do. Islam is a different culture. They view tribalism differently than we do in the Western historical sense. Uh, in America today, people still call themselves Irish. I'm Irish. I'm Italian. I mean, even Americans haven't really adopted our own nationalism. Most people don't call themselves American right off the bat. You ask somebody, hey, what's your nationality? I was going to say I'm Irish. Well, 5 generations of their parents been born right here in America, but yet they still call themselves Irish or whatever. So that example shows that in the Middle East, people don't see themselves as Saudi Arabian or necessarily or Iraqi. And this obviously is a generalization, is not talking about everybody. Somebody maybe met somebody from Saudi Arabia who was proud to be Saudi Arabian, but the point is that they see themselves as Islamic or see themselves as Arab or see themselves as you know uh, Bedouin or you know uh, Kajitsites or Butazilites, whatever the ethnic group is. Kurds is a big one in Iraq, and in Kurdistan, there's whole states in Iraq called Kurdistan. They're totally, in their opinion, ethnically different from Arabs. They're not like Arabs. They're mostly Christian. There's all these factors that we fail to understand as the U.S. So we continue the poor policies in the Middle East because we don't understand these things, and because we're stuck in the status quo left over still from the Cold War, yes, even 20 years later, and we're struggling to get past it still. And I don't see any solution in the foreseeable future as people continue to sort of. I mean, we keep talking about how they used to see Islam as monolithic. People still do. It's not. It hasn't gone away. Everybody still sees Islam as monolithic. People, even post 9/11, okay, more people are kind of aware that, okay, yeah, there's Sunnis and there's Shias, and it's not all the same thing. But the average general population doesn't see that. They're all monolithic. They're all the same. What's the difference? They're all just violent, and so the U.S. foreign policy sort of reflects that opinion of the people, because those are the people being elected, and we fail to understand their background. And this book with all this stuff. I mean, I'm not going to go over the reading. You guys have done the reading. All the nationalism, all the different things that we've gone through. The thing is, we need to wipe all that clean and just sort of view the Middle East as the Arab Middle East, and sort of try to understand how they build things, instead of trying to view it from our historical perspective, or how does Islam factor in. And I know the video's gone kind of long, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I look forward to your response.